Hear these words from the book of Genesis as we've been following the story this summer. Better? Good? Okay, good. I'll have to remember that. This is from the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 19 to 34. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why should I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb, and the first one came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am about to die." Therefore, he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "I am about to die. What use is it to have my birthright?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and he drank, and he rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. May these words be to us our light and our life. A few weeks ago, we celebrated the 4th of July, as we have every summer for years, up north at the lake, as we say in Minnesota. The actual name is Clear Lake, and it's just off Highway 47 in the heart of Glen Township. Glen is a tiny town consisting of one intersection, but it has a mighty 4th of July parade. Thousands, no lie, thousands of people line the parade route, which starts at the Slettom tree farm and follows the dirt road around the lake to the Glen store. This year, there were 85 units, including the sheriff, a fire truck, the 4-H club, floats from them and from a couple of churches and from businesses around the lakes. There were horses and a number of classic cars, including a beautifully restored 1961 Cadillac convertible driven by one John Slettom with yours truly in the passenger seat. It's pure Americana, and we love it. We inch our way around the lake shouting, "Happy 4th," and tossing out candy. It's a huge event. But it all started 40-plus years ago with just the family in the Slettom backyard. And John's father, Ed, got out the John Deere tractor, cranked up the old 43 Ford flatbed truck, and the 39 Plymouth. He blasted John Philip Sousa marches from the house, and we all drove around the yard in a circle. The Ford was outfitted with a big sign that read, "Freedom Truck." And after we'd made a few turns, we would park that thing in the middle of the lawn, and then we would have a program, because you have to have a program. The kids would recite the Pledge of Allegiance, Ed would give a little patriotic speech, and then I would channel Kate Smith and belt out "God Bless America." Edward Slettom was a man who understood freedom. He was part of the greatest generation. He fought in World War II, and in April 1945, he saw firsthand what he had been fighting for. As part of the 89th Division, he entered the Ohrdruf concentration camp and saw with Eisenhower and Patton the piles of charred and emaciated bodies. It was the first concentration camp liberated by the U.S. Army, and its grim scene was the world's first inkling of what it would come to call the Holocaust. Nazi Germany, perhaps history's most horrific example of unchecked racism. The Nazis elevated the ideal of Aryan superiority, white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, and correspondingly despised all others, because by racist logic, if one race is superior, then all others can only be inferior to that. It's an either-or proposition, a binary trap in which only two options are possible. To select one means to reject everything else. This theme of selection, rejection, haunts the story of Jacob and Esau. There is only one birthright, which is to say there is only one eldest son, by the one who inherits a double portion of his father's inheritance, and the one by whom the patrilineal line is determined. It's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, after all, not Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Jacob is a liar and a cheat, and yet centuries of biblical commentary have managed to lift him up by denigrating Esau. Early Jewish commentaries turn Esau into a real villain, and Christian theologians from Augustine to Calvin turned God's implied rejection of Esau into the basis for their doctrine of predestination. In his letter to the Romans, Paul's binary distinction between the flesh and the spirit led Christians to plant Jacob on the spirit side and Esau on the flesh side. Esau gave up his birthright for a bowl of stew. He sold his birthright to appease his material appetite. So Esau is the rejected one, the one who forgoes the blessing. But if we stick to the biblical text and not the commentaries, we learn that after Jacob flees, Esau, who was a skilled hunter and farmer, overcame his understandable anger. He married and settled down. And years later, when Jacob returned, Esau welcomed his brother with joy, and he even tries to refuse Jacob's gifts, saying, "I have enough. Keep what you have." On the other hand, there's Jacob. He's the chosen one in the story, meaning Isaac's blessing is a surrogate for God's. But what does that blessing give him? He has to leave home and flee from his brother's wrath. He makes a deal with Laban to work for 7 long years in order to marry Rachel, but then Laban tricks him into marrying Leah, and he has to work another 7 long years before he can marry Rachel. And then the only way that he can get away from Laban is once again to flee. When he returns home, his guilt makes him fear his brother. So maybe we need to look a little closer at that idea of blessing, specifically at what it means to be blessed by God. Israel is blessed by God. The whole Hebrew Bible explores this special relationship between God and the people, with the covenant blessing laying out the terms of mutual responsibility. The covenant is the basis for Israel's claim to exceptionalism. They are named and claimed by God. You shall be my people, and I shall be your God. And where did that lead them? Well, here's a brief overview. Slavery in Egypt, the Babylonian captivity, slaughter by the Romans in the decades after Jesus, worldwide dispersion, to the vicious persecutions of anti-Semitism that led all the way to the order of concentration camp and the Nazis' final solution. God's blessing appears to be a complicated thing. To be God's people appears to be a call to a certain form of witness, a living reminder of the need for justice. It includes some responsibility. It's not something to invoke lightly. And in fact, Holocaust scholar John Roth urges that very caution to all who are inclined to invoke God's blessing. I heard him make that argument in the days after 9/11, when the scholarly community in Claremont, California gathered for solidarity, support, reflection, whatever would help us understand what had just happened in our country. In those days, from everywhere, it seemed, we were hearing the phrase, "God bless America." But Professor Roth gently questioned that easy catchphrase, wondering aloud if we really knew what we were asking for. God doesn't bless the status quo. God's blessing always aims toward justice. So when a dominant society, one that elevates one group at the expense of all others, asks for God's blessing, that society is asking to be upended. Asking to be upended. It's standard practice for our presidents to end their addresses to the nation with "God bless America." It has been a standard practice for our presidents to assume and promote American exceptionalism, which conflates this nation's claims with those of ancient Israel and subtly implies that the United States of America is chosen by God, that perhaps we are the political embodiment of that chosen status. But the days are gone when I could get away with making a claim like that. Not for the content, but for the pronoun. My casual use of the pronoun we already presupposes a dominant white European Christian culture. It is the we that I was taught as a child that glosses right over the genocide of indigenous peoples, that blandly incorporates enslaved Africans into a we that obliterates the reality of their experience. It is widely said that racism is the original sin of this country. And if that is so, and I think it is, then racial equality is the vision to which this country is called. And if God's blessing works itself out in the long arc that aims toward justice, then for this country to ask for God's blessing is to ask for the upending of our racist institutions, to invite the struggle for racial equality, and to open ourselves to that work. The danger of a story like that of Jacob and Esau is that we can be lured into that binary thinking. If Jacob is God's chosen, then Esau is clearly God's rejected. If Christianity triumphed over Judaism, then Christians inherited the mantle of Jacob and became God's chosen, while Jews could be comfortably then villainized. If the men in all men are created equal is code for white male property holders, then all non-white, non-male, non-property persons can be denied equality. If the we is code for Christian, then all Muslims can be regarded with suspicion and fear. Perhaps we can circle back to Esau for some guidance here. Esau teaches us more than Jacob, perhaps, namely, there is no either or. Esau does fine. We are all God's chosen. We are all called to meet our brothers and sisters with joy, saying, I have enough. In short, we are called to reconciliation. If we are all God's children, then at the very least God asks is that we demand an America that respects all people, that dismantles racism and religious bigotry in every aspect of our society, and that encourages all of us to search with humility our own hearts and minds, our behaviors and attitudes. So what does it really mean when we say, God bless America? What are we asking for in that blessing? It's not to preserve the status quo. It is to plead for an America that is just and equitable, that respects and values all people, that understands itself not as superior to, but one among many nations, and that understands the meaning of enough. So, God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Amen. May it be so.